Hello, everyone. Today, we are going to talk all about the Calgary Flames prospects and what could be.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I am your host, Jakob, and thank you so much for joining me here as we wrap up the week and wrap up the last full week of August. Today, we are going to be talking about the recent media appearances by some of our beloved Calgary Flames, what that means, and, what we can appreciate from it. And of course, during the second segment, and today I have Hadi and Sebastian from Locked On NHL Prospects to fill y'all in on the Calgary Flames prospects, the little Wranglers and the WHLers, because there are a lot of things that need to be looked at here, and it's not just the Calgary Flames; it's the whole organization and what they're bringing into it. But make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you are getting your podcasts. I will be back to 5 episodes a week before you know it. We're sticking out August with 3 times a week, so thank you so much if you've been tuning in consistently through the summer, really at all through the summer. I know, there hasn't been a lot of news this year compared to last year, so it's summer's a little different, right? So, who's feeding us content? Rasmus Andersson, Mackenzie Weegar, and Jakob Markstrom. So, of course, obviously last weekend, Weegar was in Calgary doing the charity golf tournament. And then yesterday, the 94-minute podcast obviously split up into different interviews, but Rasmus Andersson made an appearance on 32 Thoughts, and I thought it was a good interview. I think if there's one thing fans should appreciate or should maybe show a little more appreciation for is these interviews. Not because it's just, like you get to see your favorite player or you get to learn more, but because of the work that goes on behind the scenes. And there are a lot of things, the coordination. Sometimes you have to send a list of questions, or they'll send a list saying, do not ask me about these. This is not ever to cross our conversation on the record. But I feel like not just Rasmus Andersson's interviews, but every hockey player's interviews, any athlete even, their postseason or off-season interviews rather are so insightful. It's not after an emotional loss. It's not after your season ends. It's not after the biggest win of your career to get you into the playoffs or to force a Game 7. It is months removed from everything that happened. And I think especially with the Flames, they have clearly turned over a new leaf, and you can see it. They are all so happy. There is life in those eyes again. I feel like last season, any post-game interview that you watched, it was just like 1,000-yard stare from all of these athletes. And I felt bad because clearly they're not having fun. And then, the media does have to ask these questions because it's like part of the job, and it's just uncomfortable. But it looks as if there's a new leaf that has been turned over, and the Flames are just ready to prove that they're a good team. That last year really was last year. And one of the things that Rasmus Andersson said was just we lost 17 times in overtime, you guys. And it was just, everyone is so scarred for life by that. I feel like years from now, when, this team is having a reunion in whatever context of a podcast is at that time, we're going to hear all about that. We are going to hear all about how frustrating it was and whenever the puck left to Foley's stick, you just knew it was going to hit the post. But Jakob Markstrom seems more than ready to come back. He looks well rested, which is surprising because he is a very, very young baby. And he looks happier. And I know, like, they all have that post-breakup glow. I'm going to be 100% real with you. They all have that post-breakup glow that you only get when you cut off negativity, when you change things in your life that need to be changed. You start to glow a little differently. And you probably like, this is sports, doesn't happen. No, you can definitely tell when players and environments in general are not good and things change, and you just kind of feel and see the weight lift off of the player's shoulders. It's part of the game. And it happens with us in everyday workplace. Are you kidding me? We talked about that earlier this week with Nick and how awful some work environments can be, and you just go there, you clock in, you do your job, and you leave. Because if you exude any more energy into this, you might make yourself sick. One thing that I am very much looking forward to, I think everyone is who they name captain. And you're probably like, Jess, we've talked about this ad nauseum this summer. We've done it. We've talked about it every way possible. But I feel like there is no wrong option here. I think that there are obvious front runners, but I also didn't think that Jacob Trouba was going to be named captain of the Rangers. I thought that it would have been Chris Kreider. But so never don't get your hopes up, because things can change or just go in a completely different direction than you thought. Coming up next, we are going to take a quick break from listening to me, and Hottie and Sebastian will have you covered on your NHL prospects. But before we do that, I do want to remind you all that NFL season is right around the corner, and FanDuel has you covered. And it's time to win all season long with FanDuel, because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. I'm going to assume there's going to be a prop at some point this season about Trey Lance and Dak Prescott, because, always there's going to be some sort of quarterback controversy in the league. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. Alrighty, so here we go with the interview, and I will see you all in a few minutes.
Alrighty, so moving on to our final segment, which is team number 21 in our countdown to the best prospect pool in the NHL. We've got the Calgary Flames. They just slightly edge out the Leafs and Sens for me based on who they've added this year. I really, really like the addition of Samuel Honzek. I think it's a fantastic addition. It's a great fit. I was sure they were going to go for Matthew Wood, but I believe he went just before to the Nashville Predators.
Yeah, one pick earlier, I think. 15 and 16.
Exactly. So having them pick up Samuel Honzek as what people would consider a consolation prize. I mean, for me, I think Honzek is a better player than Matthew Wood. So that works out for the best, in my opinion. Honzek he's a big towering center with a fantastically long reach, and he's able to get involved. Yeah.
Or left wing. He's played a bit of both. I'm not fully sold on him down the middle just yet, but are you?
Yeah,
I'm curious about
personally convinced at the center position. It's not just the reach and the ability to get involved in the middle of the ice. It's just, for me, there are little habits, especially when he's helping out his defenseman in the defensive zone. His tendency to swing low, even as a winger, he would occupy that F1 position and swing low on his defenseman to give them an option to break out. He's very much aware of the trouble that's going on around him. which is one thing I'm looking at mainly for my centers, which is another thing that made me kind of convinced that Otto Stenberg could play a center role as well, which not everyone's convinced of either. But yeah, that's the main thing I look for in Honzek's game. Is just he's responsible defensively to a level where I'm pretty convinced. I understand that the size and lack of proper kind of foot speed turns people off as a center, but for me, a center is more than just a puck carrier. I think that you can have a puck carrying winger without a problem. I feel like Honzek as a connector is really good, and I feel like his off puck movement, offensively and defensively, is solid enough that I'd be fairly convinced that he could do a good job at center.
Nice. Yeah. I love Samuel Honzek as well. I thought that he was a tremendous pick in that range, but also for Calgary specifically. I think I had him ranked like 16th, 17th in that range as well.
Yeah.
And I'm a really big fan of how he plays. He's super toolsy. This is a player, like one of the rare players that you're going to find in the teens of the NHL draft who has a combination of a pretty high upside and pretty high floor. I think that you're getting a pretty much guaranteed top 9 player here. It really showed last season that he had professional experience playing in a junior league, and he was probably the best puck protector in the entire draft class. Tremendous physical tools. I think his shot is really underrated.
It's absurd. Yeah,
he can really get it off from medium range, and I think the playmaking is also real strength. He's a true dual threat with significantly good handling ability too. Yep. He's incredibly well-rounded, but I mean that in a really impactful way rather than like a boring, you can do a bit of everything. Like,
he's not really a jack of all trades, master of none. He's really, I mean, he's a
master. He's a master of a few, and he's pretty much very good at everything else, which is what you love to see. And I think that he could also be molded into a variety of different roles by the Calgary development staff, which I'm sure is part of the reason that they drafted him. But I find it kind of funny that their 4 best skater prospects are all technically left wings. Yep. And I'm a little bit concerned by maybe just how much they're stacked in that one position. Like, obviously wingers are rather interchangeable, and guys like Jakob Pellitier and Matthew Coronado, Samuel Honzek, and Adar Suniev, who's fun and we'll get into in a moment. Yep. I think those are all players that can play both sides and be relatively effective, but the lack of center depth is a bit concerning, and Connor Zary has had a lot of injury problems, and I'm not quite sure how he projects anymore at this point, but I haven't watched too much of him. So have you gotten an eye on him a couple times?
I'm sorry, it's been a while since I've watched him, but I was just going to say that's exactly what makes me think that they might want to develop Samuel Honzek as a center.
For sure.
And that's
they have all the incentive to do so. Yeah.
Exactly. And, you know, with guys in their system like Pellitier, like Coronado, like Adar Suniev, we mentioned earlier, William Strongbrand as well. They've got a lot of guys who are going to be playing that position. They've got a decent amount of depth on that side. I think that it's just a matter of time before we see Samuel Honzek either play at center at the junior level or get traded to a team that's going to play him at center, because I think the Flames are intent on having him play that position, which is fully understandable. For me, the issue with Calgary specifically and why they're kept out of the top end is, first and foremost, I don't see anyone who I can be fully convinced will play a top line role in their pool. Second of all, it's a lack of depth at right wing and at right defense, and just defense in general. They added Etienne Morin, who I'm not convinced about. They've added Jeremy Poirier, who I'm equally not as convinced about, and Jan Kuznetsov as well. I mean, for me, the difference maker for them is that big prospect in goal, in Dustin Wolf. But before, talk us through Adar Suniev, because I know you're a big fan.
Oh, he's fun. I've really enjoyed watching Penticton last season, and Adar Suniev is one of the most wacky prospects that was eligible in 2023. He was the worst skater in the entire draft class by a fair margin. It was him and Matthew Wood were the clear 2 worst skaters in my view. Really bad strides, super wide. That said, he's really intense and he applies pressure, and he's going to need to improve the skating to be able to apply the same level of pressure against pro competition, but he's going to have time. Like, he's going to have to marinate for like 4 years at least before he challenges for an NHL spot. But this is a really intense player with a very hard shot. He's a really strong goal scorer, and he's quite defensively responsible. So I think that the skating is really the one massive limiting factor that needs to be addressed. But if you can stick him next to a really high-end skating coach for a couple years, I think you're going to see some really, really big steps for him. And then before we go to Dustin Wolf, we have to talk about the last two high-end forward prospects, and Jakob Pellitier and Matthew Coronado. So do you have a favorite of those two?
Definitely Coronado. I like Pellitier. I just see him more as a projectable kind of third line scoring winger rather than a full-on top six talent. I think Coronado has the effort level, the smarts, and the goal scoring ability in order to become a true second line and borderline complementary first line player. I'm not convinced of the first line potential fully. I think it's possible, but it'll take a lot of stars aligning, whereas the second line upside is fairly easy to see. So that's kind of my take on those two. I don't know if you prefer Pellitier, but no. I think
it's a big gap in my mind too. Like, I think Coronado has a really decent likelihood of being a top six player that can really move the needle. And Pellitier, I've tried a lot because the AHL production is really impressive, and it has been consistently. But whenever I've watched him play, I've been seeing a player who, yes, has some really, really interesting tools and abilities, but in terms of that tangible NHL upside, I'm a little bit more skeptical on his front than I am on Coronado's, who I've been a really big fan of going back to his draft year.
Absolutely. And to finish things off for the Flames, we left the best for last in Dustin Wolf. For me, after Devin Levi, this is the best goaltending prospect in the NHL.
Jesper Wallstedt? Wow.
I like Jesper Wallstedt, but
wow.
I'm more convinced of Dustin Wolf's potential, and maybe it's my favoritism for short kings, but
possibly
I very, very much see the upside in Dustin Wolf's game. He's perfectly tailored his game to his lack of size. Reminds me a lot of UC Saros, and so does Devin Levi. Just in terms of the way that they play, working perfectly with them being smaller, more athletic, more mobile players.
I concur.
He's very much. I mean, I love Jesper Wallstedt. I love Yaroslav Askarov. I love Spencer Knight. Those guys are kind of usually the guys you see mentioned when talking about the best goaltending prospect in the NHL. Yeah, but for me, Dustin Wolf he's a perfect example of why you should scout goaltenders with guys who know how to scout short goaltenders, because a lot of these guys slip in rankings just because they're small, and you'll see a lot of teams pick up some 6'6", 6'7" goaltenders who don't have the athletic ability, don't have the puck tracking or the play reading or the hockey sense that a guy like Wolf or Levi has. I mean, for me, Dustin Wolf has everything you want in order to make the NHL and become a very, very solid puck stopper. It's just a matter of, will the team trust him enough in order to see him play those scenarios, and will he be able to force their hand if he doesn't, if they don't, essentially. And that's kind of the question with me with Wolf, but I'm convinced. I'm personally sold. So
I am too. I still have Wallstedt kind of a tier above. I believe in the toolkit a bit too much.
Yeah.
But to me, it's a quite clear top 3 and top 4 in terms of goalie prospects in the league. And I think it's Wallstedt, Levi, and Dustin Wolf. And then I think Askarov has a firm hold on the 4th spot in my view. But yeah, this is a tremendous prospect and definitely a big difference. So I definitely do think that there's a bit of a gap between Ottawa and then Toronto and Calgary, as we've kind of broken down those prospect pools. I see some more upside in Calgary and Toronto. I think that Matthew Nyes and Coronado and Honzek and Wolf are significantly ahead of Ottawa, which is kind of indicative of that big gap that we have between 23 and 22.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me on Locked On Flames today. As always, I'm your host, Jess Belmosto, and what a week. We have made it through 4.5 months without Calgary Flames hockey. Did anyone see that coming? I didn't. I didn't know what we were going to do. But thank you to the guys at Locked On NHL Prospects. It is great to receive insight from experts, because I can look at a player and just see like surface level things, but people who have that trained eye, especially with prospects, it makes it so much better, and you can really understand a player's ceiling better. Obviously, they do talk about Dustin Wolf and just all the praise for him. He is wonderful. There is no denying that. And I thought it was interesting that the size of the goaltender was brought up because, I feel like we're so used to seeing goaltenders that are like marquies, like 6'4", 6'5", and then you have like Ben Bishop at 6'6". I mean, obviously Ben Bishop's not playing anymore, but you have really tall goalies. And I don't think that Dustin Wolf is all that tall. But it goes to show you that size doesn't necessarily matter in this situation. And they gave props to the Flames development team. And I think that that's great because it's true, Again, just like I just mentioned, you have to have a trained eye to pick out special skills and like see something in these players. I don't know. I have not watched enough like film. I watch like hockey for entertainment and not necessarily scouting reports. But it's so nice to see the Flames get some recognition in their prospect pool. It's not super deep, like they mentioned, but there are some great talents in there. And Samuel Honzek, who is their most recent first-round draft pick from this year, sounds like he's going to turn out to be a great player. He's not going to be a first-line center or winger, whatever they decide to play, put him at. He can play both. But I believe Sebastian said he's more of a winger, left wing, rather than playing down the middle. But he's a big dude. He's big. He's tall. Gotta put some muscle on. And it sounds like he has some skills that the Flames could use. He has a nasty shot. He can fire. Like, the Flames having a shooter and a finisher. Could you imagine what that team would look like? It's not going to look as good as it did 2 years ago, but it's going to look better than last year. And again, the bar is not very high for that. But I just think it's great to see a player come into the organization that is, his size. He wants to, obviously continue developing, and he is a well-rounded player. And I really liked that they said, he's not like a well-rounded player in a boring way. He's actually very skilled in a lot of these areas, and it makes his game better. And that's one thing you just need from the Flames. You need someone who can make this team better. And not just one person, because you can't rely on one person to fix your team. But it's great to see, a third line, plus middle six maybe, developing in their prospect pool. I think that it's hard to, get these guys to the NHL. Some players just don't make it to the NHL. That's how it goes. But getting the most out of everyone is what you want. And seems like the guys are pretty positive and set on Honzek having a high ceiling, which is great. Or Honzek, sorry. Having a high ceiling. He seems like a really good kid. I haven't heard anything negative about him. One thing that did come up was Connor Zary. Connor Zary has unfortunately been battling injuries. And I feel like any prospect or like first year in the NHL, you get injured, your whole career is derailed. You obviously are missing crucial time. People start to doubt you. Then heaven forbid you have another one the following year. Oh my God, you're injury prone and now you're a liability. But with Connor Zary, I don't know if his skill set is truly enough to be a full-time NHL player at the moment. I don't know. I guess it would depend again on the team and what it's looking like, or if a different team, is interested in him. But it's it's just hard to say. And I think that's one of the fun things about prospects is that you can just hope and get excited because you have to. There's so much untapped potential and so many bright futures in juniors and in the AHL and college and whatnot because, obviously they're drafted and it's for a good reason. But thank you everyone so much for tuning into today's episode of Locked On Flames. There is always room to grow in every part of your life, including developing your hockey skills. So thank you all so much for tuning in today. I hope you enjoy your weekend, and we will be back next week with the latest on the Elias Lindholm, Michael Backlund, and whoever else saga here on Locked On Flames.